Now, over the next hour, we'll be talking about birds to look for in the countryside in winter, discovering how the way that humans have shaped the countryside affects these birds and what farmers are doing to help bring some of them back. RSPB Conservation Officer Michelle Duggan will be discussing the fragile farmland life of the yellowhammer, a once common countryside bird. I think you can see on the corner of your screen now, and it's now on the UK Red List, sadly. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks.
We'll
Um,
also be hearing about linnets from Michelle and the farmers that she works with, linnets and some of the other species that Michelle and the farmers that she works with are helping. We'll also be hearing about the curlew from our Senior Species Recovery Officer, Sam Lee. Hello, Sam.
Hi, Jamie. Hi, everyone.
And nice to see you there, Sam. Countryside wetlands are a home to a variety of wading birds, including lapwings, redshanks, and oyster catchers. And we'll be finding out more about how these about these birds and what they need from Pete Webster. He'll also be telling us about how his family farm is providing vital habitat for them on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales. Hello, Pete.
Hi, Jamie. Hi, everyone.
So, yeah, over to you, Michelle. Let's hear about yellowhammers.
so yes, thank you. And today I'm going to be discussing the fragile farmland life of the yellowhammer, how to identify these species and other priority species over the winter, and some of the work that farmers have been doing to give these birds a helping hand. So the yellowhammer, or locally known as the yellow yarnie, is an iconic farmland bird, but maybe not seen as often as it once was. It's a delight if you're fortunate enough to spot it. So the yellowhammer is a member of the bunting family. It's a similar size to a chaffinch. The male is unmistakable with its bright yellow head and underparts. The back is rich brown streaked with black and a plain reddish brown rump. In flight, it can show its outer white tail feathers as well. The female is a bit duller than the male, but similar in colour. And I'll just show you a comparison here. So the male is the bird on the right, very brightly coloured, but the female again is similar in colour, but a bit duller. So the Yellowhammer has a very distinctive and easy song to remember, and it can be remembered with the phrase, a little bit of bread and no cheese. So I'll just let you hear that now. So when you hear that, they're often seen perched on top of hedges, bushes, or even lampposts, singing out this melody. And it's a good tip that when you're out bird watching or out in the country and you hear that song, try looking on these high places, as they can be quite difficult to see against the autumn colours that we've got now at the minute across the country. So where to see them? In the spring, they breed in areas of grassland and within arable fields with hedgerows, vegetated embankments, and dense scrub. So this is a picture of some gorse in the picture. They build their nest on or near the ground within thick vegetation. And yellowhammers are mainly seed eaters, but at this time of the year, they will feed mainly on insects and other invertebrates. So in the winter, they are often seen in small flocks like this, mixing with other buntings, finches, and sparrows, visiting fields that offer a source of seed or grain. So, for example, a stubble field that has been recently harvested where the grain has been spilt, or areas of weedy plant growth where seeds of nettle, grasses, and docks are often eaten as well. So, unfortunately, the yellowhammer has undergone severe declines, with approximately a 62% drop in the population since 1967 to 2020. Across the UK and Ireland, it is a red listed species, with approximately 70,000 pairs remaining. So, why is this? So, since the 1950s, there's been a change in farming practice from traditional methods to more intensive farming, with greater availability of larger and faster machines, allowing farms to become more productive. So what does this mean? Many farms at this time were switching from spring sown cereals to autumn and winter sowing instead. Therefore, there's less spilt grain and stubbles available. The grazing intensity increased and cutting regimes changed. So cutting hay switched from cutting to silage. This meant less wildflowers and plant communities, therefore fewer seeds and grasses for birds to eat. So over the winter, this meant birds were going hungry. Farms are put under a lot of pressure to increase the yield and productivity. Therefore, field sizes were increased, resulting in the loss of many marginal land, such as hedgerows or areas of scrub, reducing the habitat for nesting. The increased use of herbicides meant there were also less weeds and areas of rough ground for insects to colonise, combined with the use of insecticides, reduced the number of insects and therefore less food available for yellowhammer to feed their chicks in the spring and summer months. So approximately 71% of the UK's land is managed by farmers and landowners, and the RSPB has been working with farms across the UK for over 30 years, building positive relationships with the farming community, offering support and advice on nature-friendly farming practices and demonstrating what good looks like, helping individuals to farm in both an environmentally and economically sound fashion. Agri-environment schemes are a key mechanism in helping deliver for species like yellowhammer and other threatened farmland birds through the creation of nesting habitat or providing a source of food in the spring and over winter. Collectively, we aim to work on a coordinated landscape scale to link up areas that still support species such as yellowhammer so they can spread and colonise into new areas. I wanted to showcase an example of an option within the agri-environment scheme that a number of farms have implemented in County Down that supports seed eaters over the winter. So the winter feed crop, or also known as wild bird cover, is a spring sown crop mixture which is left unharvested over the winter to provide seed for these farmland birds. It's an alternative source of seed food for birds where the traditional sources from the weedy stubbles and spilt grain have become less available. So while arable farms have the most potential for seed eaters, grassland farms also provide great opportunities through the establishment of these plots. Not only is it a rich source of food for seed eaters, but it also supports owl and kestrel, as many small rodents and mice forage on the seed as well. So this picture that you see here is taken in the spring, so it's still quite bright green and colourful. So this might be something that you might expect to see during the winter. So it looks a bit like an unharvested crop field, but it would depend on what's been planted. So here's just a bit of a closer look. There's different plants run out of seed at different times of the year. So like I was saying, planting different varieties is a great way of extending the life of the winter bird cover. So things such as spring sown oats, barley, linseed and triticale. These different crop types provide the maximum benefit for the widest range of species. So I'm just going to go through some of the other species that you're likely to find foraging in areas like this over the winter. So first off, the linnet, a member of the finch family. The name linnet is a reference to its diet, specifically to the seeds of flax. So the genus Linum. This small slim finch was once a popular cage bird because of their beautiful song. In the spring, males are marked with crimson foreheads and breasts with a grey face. So as you can see from this picture, that this is a male. However, though, in the winter, males molt their feathers after the breeding season, from July to October, and will lose their crimson forehead and breast, and will appear more brown and streaky. So the image on the left is potentially a male that's molted, but also females are this color as well. So much browner, streaky, and lack any crimson marks. So this is a picture either of a male or a female linnet, just sitting perched. So it might be something you could expect to see while striding about. Their flight is actually lovely and bouncy, and they make this lovely twittering song, and can be seen in large flocks during the winter. So I'll let you hear the linnet now. So I was fortunate enough to take a video of a flock of approximately 100 linnet flying out of a patch of the wild bird cover or winter feed crop that was planted by a farmer in County Down. It was really satisfying to watch all these linnet flying out of this wild bird cover, and it was really rewarding to see these birds that are using the plot, because no one that working alongside this farmer has helped put it there. So when you're out and about, especially if the birds are flushed out of an area of wild bird cover like that, or out of a field, you might come across a hedgerow where they've landed like this. If you have a good pair of binoculars, you can get a closer look and try to identify what they are. As most of the time it'll be a flock of various finches, buntings, such as the yellowhammer or the linnet. So I'm just going to go and show you some of the other species that might be found within flocks like this, and some tips on how to identify them. So the reed bunting, it's a sparrow-sized, but a bit slimmer than a sparrow, with a long, deeply notched tail. The males have this lovely black head, white collar, and a drooping white mustache with quite a chunky seed-eating bill. The image on the right is a female, and they can easily be distinguished as the female is a lot browner and streaky and lacks the black head of the male. So unfortunately, reed bunting have also seen similar declines due to changes in farming practice through the loss of habitat and sources of food over the spring and winter months. So this is a reed bunting within an area of reeds. Usually they're found within damp or wet areas. So if you know you're near a river or damp ground, you might be more likely to see them. But also they can be seen foraging on the ground within fields, like you see here. So just keep an eye out in both the hedges and on the ground. So the tree sparrow, as the name suggests, it can be associated with wooded areas, hedgerows, trees and parks. And in the winter, they can be seen in flocks foraging across agricultural land. So tree sparrows are similar in colour to a house sparrow. If you're not really too sure what a house sparrow looks like, I'll show you now in a minute what a house sparrow looks like. But the tree sparrow has lovely chocolate coloured feathers streaked with grey and black, and has a pale white collar around its neck. They also, you've probably noticed, have this small black dot on their cheek. It is often the easiest distinguishing feature when you see one. It's a lovely chestnut coloured head and has a small black bib below its beak. Both males and females have the same coloration, so they're difficult to tell apart when you see them. So the bird on the left is the house sparrow, and the bird on the right is the tree sparrow. So the house sparrow is often an easily confused species with the tree sparrow, but you can see on the house sparrow it has a grey cap on its head and has bright white cheeks without any black marks. and also the bib on its chest is slightly bigger than on the tree sparrow. So keep an eye out for the chestnut head of the tree sparrow and a lovely black dot on its cheek. So a skylark, commonly found within open grassland, upland and heath, but also within arable fields and unploughed stubbles over the winter. They have lovely brown streaking pattern for camouflage and have a short crest on its head that can be both raised and lowered. Some of you might know the sound of a skylark, as its lovely, long and pleasant melody is often given in flight. It can be heard in both the spring and over the winter. So I'll let you hear that now. So a skylark is a ground nesting bird, and they've seen similar declines due to changes in cutting regimes of grass. So from the switch from hay to silage, um, fields are often cut out throughout the nesting season and are cut more frequently. So there's a loss of suitable nesting habitat for them. So finally, the barn owl. This iconic and distinctive bird probably needs no introduction. It has a white heart-shaped face, a buff honey-coloured back, and wings with pure white underparts. It's nocturnal, so it might be seen late in the evening, early in the morning, hunting over areas of rough grassland, field edges such as hedgerows and ditches, and along road verges. Usually areas of grass that are thick and tussocky, which is what I mean by rough grassland, which is cut or grazed less. The barn owl has a wingspan of approximately 80 to 95 centimeters, so quite long. Their flight is slow and silent, and they can be seen flying over the ground. Frequently, it hovers when hunting. They feed on small mammals such as mice and voles. It can also eat larger mammals, including rats, frogs, bats, and sometimes small birds. Their voice is a piercing shriek and especially can be heard during courtship. So this is just a short video of a barn owl hunting, as this might be something you might experience whilst you're out and about. So to finish up, here's the summary of the different farmland birds we discussed today. Hopefully you're now able to identify them and you've got a bit of an insight into some of the work RSPB is doing with the farming community to help these threatened species. So thank you for listening, and I hope you get to see some of these wonderful species over the winter.
Thank you, Michelle. And that's reminded me just how wonderful the farmland can be across the UK for a variety of bird species. Looking forward to going out and finding some of those myself very soon. We do get yellowhammers near where I live in sort of semi-rural Bedfordshire, and I like to boast that when we first moved into our house, we did have linnets in the garden very briefly, and they're always a joy to see. Going to go over to Sam now for a slightly larger, a larger species with a louder, more distinctive call, which you heard at the beginning, and that's the curlew. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, hello, everyone, and great to be with you today. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to be telling you how you can identify a curlew, where you can get out to go get your curlew fix, why they're getting a little bit harder to see and hear each year, and what RSPB is doing to try and secure their future, and what you too can also do to help us to do that. So firstly, what is a curlew? Well, it's our largest wading species that you'll see on the shores of the UK here. They've got a wingspan of almost that of a barn owl, actually, from Michelle's talk. It can be up to about 1 metre in length, and they stand sort of roughly about 50 centimetres high. So in the corner of my screen, you can just see a shot there of a curlew, although its most distinctive feature tucked away, but next to a redshank, which you're also likely to see when you go out and see them over winter. And you can see there's quite a big size comparison, but probably their most notable feature is this long down curved bill that they have. And that's what gives them their Latin name. That Latin name sort of stands for it refers to the new moon, arch of the new moon, or the bow of a bow. There's only one other species that shares this feature, and that's the whimbrel. And this is a really good time of year to not get those species confused, because most of our whimbrel have actually gone further south. They should be wintering down in Africa. It can be a bit confusing during the spring and autumn during passage when whimbrel are moving through, but largely speaking, at this time of year, if you see a bird that looks like a curlew with this huge down curved bill, it's more likely than not going to be a curlew. And the sort of distinguishing other feature you can use is as soon as they call, that is absolutely distinctive, and will help you not get confused. And often it is their call that you'll hear before you see them, despite their sound. So some of you might have heard this earlier if you joined. You heard towards the end there this really bubbling sound, and this call is often described as sort of melancholy, haunting, eerie. It's this melodic sort of curly sound that carries across their habitats and earn them the nickname the voice of the moors. And to me, I just think it's a really integral part of the soundscape of our countryside, but one that is getting to hear harder to hear each year. So from sort of mid-February onwards, they'll be found on their breeding habitats, which can include quite a range of habitats, actually. So they might breed on fenland, on imbibe, rough pasture, and sort of peat bogs. So here's a good range in these photos. And what they're really after is areas of low disturbance and with a sort of varying vegetation height. So they really like these tussocky areas, but they need these shorter swards as well to move their chicks through, and also for them to sort of access invertebrates in the ground. And other species that benefits from these habitats include the redshank and also snipe, who will also use these areas of tussocks to sort of shelter their nests and chicks as well, like the curlews. And some great RSPB reserves where you can go see our curlews during breeding season include RSPB Inch Marshes, which is actually that photo in the bottom left-hand corner up in Scotland on the Cairngorms. You've got in Northern England, Geltsdale, which I think is the top left corner actually. And over in Northern Ireland, the only site I think where you can visit our breeding curlew by boat is over on the Lower Loch Earn Islands, our most westerly reserve site, and that's an excellent place to see our breeding curlews. But from late July onwards, they actually move to our coastlines for winter, and this is what you can expect to see. So at this time of year, you're going to see our curlews often hanging about with other curlews, sort of probing into the soft mud and intertidal habitats, looking for worms, mollusks and crabs. They'll often be hanging around with other wading species such as oyster catchers and redshank and other curlew as well. And the weather and tide times can be really important and sort of dictate whereabouts you might be finding them. So if it's high tide, and they'll often be found on the farmland adjacent to the coastline, agricultural fields, including sort of overwintering crops. So near me, there's a lot of brassicas. They can often be really good feeding ground because they tend to keep the ground a little bit warmer. You get a few more insects under there. The ground's a little bit softer. But say we had a hard frost or it's low tide, then they'll return to these soft, muddy, intertidal areas to seek out their food. And whereabouts can you go in the country to see them? So the map on your left-hand side is all of our RSPB reserves that support wintering curlew. And actually across our reserve network, we support about 10,000 curlews over winter. And they come together in sort of these large flocks. So really good areas to go and see them tend to be sort of estuary areas. So at the top there is a picture of Merse Head up on the Solway Firth. You've got Morecambe Bay in the northwest, and you've got Snettisham on the North Norfolk coast. And our curlews tend to remain fairly local. So some of our Scottish birds shoot over westwards. Some of them pop across to the coast of the islands of islands. And some of the more southerly breeders actually go slightly further south to France, but in general, most of our curlews stay on the British Isles. They just move from their inland breeding habitat to more coastal areas. But what we do find is we get this huge influx of birds actually from Fennoscandia, which means our numbers can get up to about 125,000 wintering curlews. So a great spectacle to see during the winter months, but one that actually masks a pretty serious problem. So unfortunately, curlews are red listed, and of the world's 8 species of curlews, 2 are already extinct, 3 are in decline, and that includes our Eurasian curlew. And in 2015, they were upgraded to red listed status on the UK Birds of Conservation Concern, and a British Birds paper described them as the UK's highest conservation priority bird species. And that's because here in the UK, we actually support 1/4 of the global breeding population of curlews. We're actually the 3rd most important country in the world for curlews, and globally, they're also experiencing a population decline. But this is exacerbated by the fact that we have such a large proportion of them here, so 1/4 of the global population, and we've actually seen their numbers essentially halve in the past 30 years. So they're experiencing a national rapid decline and an adverse global status as well. And the problem is that with such a significant proportion of the population, whatever happens here in the UK to our curlews actually has huge impacts on the population worldwide. So what is happening to our curlews? So as Michelle mentioned, we've seen huge changes in our landscape, and curlews do use farmland habitats. And so the fact that 70% of our land use is in agricultural uses, that means that changes in farming practices can have a substantial impact on them. And broadly speaking, their habitat sort of loss and degradation is related to this intensification. And that can be through drainage, so reducing the wet areas, changes in stocking densities, so we've increased them, and also changed the type of stock we use, from moving away from cattle to more sheep-based livestock management systems, and also the changes of timing. Again, Michelle mentioned this, a change from hay cutting, which happens later in the season, to the earlier silage cutting, which can clash with the breeding timing for our curlews. But because they are a species that has actually evolved to utilise farmland habitat, they also need our farming practices to create the right conditions for them during the breeding season. So to create these differences in sward structures, actually some of our farming practices is really important. And land abandonment and areas becoming too rank and long in vegetation is also an issue for our curlews, as is actually land changing from farming into another land use. And currently a very live topic is that of woodland planting. Now, the right tree in the right place is generally considered a good thing and something that we would encourage. But if poorly planned, it can actually lead to directly removing habitat away from some of our ground nesting birds. And what you get alongside this direct removal of habitat is you can also get something called the edge effect. So research has actually shown that curlew avoid nesting within 500 meters from a woodland plantation. And part of that is because woodlands can also increase the risk of predation, but probably this reduction in habitat quality will also increase predation events as well. And ultimately, all of this is combining to mean that our curlews are simply not producing enough young year after year to maintain or even increase the population. So enough of these cute little chicks are not surviving to fledging so that they can come back and contribute to the population the following years. So what are we doing to reverse these declines? So we've got a pretty good approach here at the RSPB, and planning our conservation strategies for migratory birds can be really complex, because what you have to do is identify all of the issues that are affecting them across their annual life cycle. So for curlews, I've sort of mentioned the threats mainly associated with their breeding grounds, but they also face threats on their wintering grounds. So recreational disturbance will be a real problem whilst they're wintering and can cause them stress. And then on passage, they might face issues such as illegal hunting or hunting in some of the areas that they pass over. So our conservation teams have actually helped us to close these knowledge gaps and understand where we're best placed to put our conservation efforts, and also what those efforts should be, what those interventions should be. So they've identified, by working with other organisations and research institutions, what the problems are across that annual life cycle, and tested some of the solutions. And then with those solutions, we can actually roll them out on our reserves networks. So we've got 25 reserves that support significant amounts of breeding curlews, and we're taking a really holistic approach to our management of their reserves, making sure that across our reserve we're not only demonstrating best practice habitat management, but also making sure that we're providing all of the various different habitats, that habitat mosaic over a suitable scale for our curlew, so that when they're breeding, nesting and rearing chicks, they have everything they need on our reserves. And using that habitat management and that experience, we're also going out and providing advice to landowners and managers in the wider countryside. So here is a picture. Some of you might recognise the Slemish Mountain in the background, but over on the Antrim Plateau, we've been working with a group of farmers for over a decade now, and of an area of about 8,000 or so hectares, so a huge area. And it's here where we're going to make the biggest gains, because our reserves network, whilst important, probably only supports about 1% of our breeding curlew population. So if we're truly going to reverse these declines, we must deliver sustainable habitat management at the landscape scale across the wider countryside. And this is where farmers and our managers are so important in doing this. And our group of farmers over in Antrim have actually been so good over the past couple of years. They've probably produced some of the best breeding success of any area of the UK, which is really good news, and hopefully that will continue. In the corner there's also a couple of farmers that actually won an award, the Curlew Cup, from the Nidderdale AONB and Yorkshire Agricultural Society. They work closely with our team in Northern England and Geltsdale, and what they did is change some of their farming practices. They reintroduced cattle to improve their grazing and rush management, and they also removed those cattle during breeding season, so there was no risk of trampling or disturbance to our curlew. Up in Scotland, we're working with a group of farmers, about 50 farmers in the Clyde Valley, all working to improve breeding habitat across that landscape scale. And we're also working with other organisations and partnerships across the country, where there are lots of people interested in reversing the declines for curlew, which is great because we cannot do it single-handedly. So over in Wales, we're part of Gylfaennu Cymru, and a couple of years ago they released their national recovery plan for curlew and identified 12 important curlew areas, or ICAs. And in Wales and Northern Ireland, the situation is really severe, because although we've overall declined by about 50% over the past 30 years, this decline hasn't been equal across each of our 4 countries. So in Northern Ireland and Wales, we're actually predicting extinction as breeding season, breeding species even, by 2033. So in Wales, as I said, there's Gylfaennu Cymru. That's a whole group of different organisations coming together to deliver effective habitat management and conservation effort for curlew across Wales in the most important sites. RSPB is leading on 2, and organisations, a different organisation leads on each of the ICAs, and that's sort of replicated in different ways in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and Ireland as well. So we're also delivering some pretty massive projects as well. So up in Scotland, we've got the Orkney Native Wildlife Project, which is eradicating non-native stoats from the island of Orkney. They are a significant predator of ground nesting birds. And across 5 project sites across the UK, we're delivering the EU-funded Curlews in Crisis project. And this project aims to deliver emergency action to halt the decline of curlews within these 5 priority sites that are in Northern Ireland, Wales, England and Scotland over a period of 4 years. So it started towards the end of 2020 and finishes towards the end of next year. And you can see here some of the interventions we're doing. So that's one of our project officers, Ian Cole in Northern England, putting up a temporary nest protection fence that sort of protects our nests and chicks just as they hatch at that really vulnerable stage. And he's also training volunteers to help us to do that during the breeding season. You've got one of the cattle collars being used by one of our farmers also in Northern England and Wales as well. This means that we can remove fence lines and be more dynamic with our grazing management. So fence lines can actually help encourage predators either through perch points or allowing them sort of linear access into fields. By using cattle collars, it means we can more effectively graze specific areas and removes those features that can have potential benefits for allowing access to our vulnerable curlews from potential predators. We're also doing some pretty intensive monitoring. So there's one of our research assistants, Alex, I think he's at Inch Marshes, following some of our tagged curlew chicks from this year. And we're also engaging with the local communities because they're going to be the real legacy actually of this project after it ends. So it's really important that they know what great an asset the curlews on their doorstep are and how they can help to support them into the future. And that's when I mentioned earlier about Loch Earn, this is the place where they're on the boat off to visit that breeding curlew on their islands and doing some great community art projects. So that's some of the stuff that we're doing across the UK, really focusing on where we can have the most impact and where there are significant populations of curlews. But even if you're nowhere near curlews, there's ways that you can help support curlew conservation as well. So last year, we actually worked with musician and producer Merlin Driver to create the Curlew Sounds album. And you heard some of those sounds from that album if you joined earlier. So Merlin went around the UK and recorded some of our curlew sounds throughout the year. So that's one half of the album. But he also motivated about 12 musicians to be inspired to create unique pieces of work inspired by curlews, and that includes people like David Gray, Talvin Singh, The Unthanks, among others. And currently all of the net profits from the sales of this album go directly towards curlew conservation. So if you purchase this album after today, hopefully I will see that in my budget transaction reports over the next coming months and can utilize that in helping to fund some of our curlew conservation projects. You can also look for produce produced from farms that are doing at least 10% habitat management for nature on their farms. So you can look out for the RSPB's Fair to Nature mark, accreditation mark. And I believe one of the first products to sport this mark will be Summerdown herbal teas later on this year. But if you visit the Fair to Nature website, you can see several other products that are available as well. But might not have the mark on them yet. But hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next few years, this mark will start to be more familiar on produce in sort of our supermarkets. You can also join our community of keen curlew knitters. I'm really gutted that I forgot my hat today, but we have a whole gallery of people that have knitted their own curlew hat or persuaded others with the skill to do it for you. So unfortunately, they're not for sale. They do take a little bit of hard work and crafty skill from yourselves, but this curlew hat design was created by Linda Shearer from the Shetland Guild of Knitters, Weavers and Dyers in Shetland. And on the Curlew Life website, you can see a whole gallery of people with their curlew headgear. And, you know, you can help raise awareness of the plight of the curlew by getting people to ask you about your fancy headgear. And lastly, you can also volunteer. So we've got the Species Volunteer Network, and that's supporting some of our curlew projects. So as I mentioned, Ian up in Northern England is training people to put up temporary nest protection fences. Down the bottom here are some of our volunteers in Wales that help to try and find nests and monitor breeding pairs over the breeding season earlier in the year. But that project actually works across a whole range of threatened species across the UK. So no matter where you are, there should be a project that you can help. And it's all about engaging volunteers with hands-on emergency action for our most threatened species. So lastly, hopefully you will get out and go and see your curfew of curlews over this winter and get that amazing sound, which to me just makes the hairs on the back of my arms lift up. I just could never get sick of it. And sort of through the habitat management we do for curlews, it's not just curlews that benefit, but through habitat restoration, we're delivering loads of ecosystem benefits such as carbon storage. We're also helping other species that share those habitats and landscapes as well, such as the redshank and the snipe, as mentioned earlier. So thank you very much for listening today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's talks.
Hello. Oh, thank you so much, Sam. That was absolutely brilliant. I love hearing those curlews. Now, we're going to move on to Pete Webster, our farmer, special guest speaker today. Pete, over to you. Let's hear all about your farm.
Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for asking me to speak on this webinar. So yeah, I'm Pete Webster. I farm in partnership with my wife, Rona, at Lakeland Hall Farm, which is in North Yorkshire. Rona's family have been farming this particular farm for 93 years. She's the fourth generation of her family to be farming here with the land and nature, whilst trying to make a profitable business from the land. We have been farming the land ourselves for the last 5 years, and we have a further 25 years of a farming tenancy. We're both determined to leave the farm in a better place for conservation and environmental position than when we took it on, and that's one of our key ambitions of our farming business. So as I said, Lakeland Hall Farm is sat just 5 miles to the west of Settle in North Yorkshire. We're just outside the Yorkshire Dales National Park, but we're tucked in the northeastern area of the Forest of Bowland area of outstanding natural beauty. Yeah, we're just tucked in there. So we're positioned fantastically well, really, between two beautiful areas. So the farm is predominantly grassland, with pockets of woodland and wetland covering 172 hectares, which is 425 acres. The predominant enterprise is dairy cows, and we're currently milking about 200 cows from a grass-based system. We carry 120 young stock. These cows are outside for in excess of 8 months of the year, grazing grass. We also have a small flock of sheep, running about 180 easy care sheep. Livestock farming is the core business, utilizing the ability of cattle and sheep to convert plant protein to proteins suitable for humans to consume. However, nature has a huge part to play on the farm. We're thrilled that the curlew has chosen us as its home. On the farm, we have had over 8 pairs nesting on the farm this year, which is just fantastic. And working with RSPB and the Forest of Bowland, ANOB, we've managed to locate at least 6 nests, I think it was, and put camera traps on them, just to monitor the progression of these birds whilst they're with us. We have 3 pairs of resident barn owls that use vacant stone barns and hollow trees to successfully rear chicks most years. And with the help of a trained and qualified BTO bird ringer, they ring the chicks each year, which helps with their monitoring and gives them background to and knowledge to how the birds are doing in our particular area. You can see here there's a video on your right where the birds are hunting over some triple SI ground we have, and we're lucky enough to have them hunting over the meadows as well. Part of the farm encompasses Orstwick and Lakeland Moss triple SI, so that's a special site of scientific interest. And you can just see the photo in the bottom right hand corner. You can see some wetland and then woodland, and again the same areas in the top of the main photo. And this particular triple SI is special for many reasons. It's a lowland raised bog that has lowland wet woodland, neutral pasture, and flush and spring fen. So it's a very unique part of the farm. It's just an amazing haven for all sorts of wildlife and invertebrates down there. It's a favourite with the cuckoo nesting in early summer, and swifts are quite often found feeding over the woodland in the dusk period of the summertime. And then during the winter time, it's a roosting ground for rooks and crows. So it's a fantastic habitat. And just lately, we've actually been part of a project to monitor whether this particular area is a roosting ground for hen harriers that come down off the moors as well. So we'll continue to monitor that. There are numerous birds on the farm, many of which are actually on the Birds of Conservation Concern red list. We have reed warblers, skylarks, meadow pipits, missel thrush, common starling, house sparrow, yellow wagtail, as well as numerous other birds that we frequently see, whether it be in the pasture land that the cattle are grazing, or on the wet grassland that the native breed cattle graze. Heavy rain event 2 years ago made me look at a piece of land on the farm with a different perspective, really. And it made me think, could we create something on the farm that is unique and is more of a permanent feature to help, I suppose, help a different group of birds at different times of the year. And so from this picture, you can see that there's two clear areas of standing water. The near one, this side of the stone barn, is one that doesn't flood as frequently, but the far one in the distance is actually on a wetland, and that one floods fairly frequently, and it doesn't take a huge rain event for it to flood. And we thought, could we create a new and enhance the habitat we got within the farm? So the area we identified, known to us, is the moss. This is it when it's not in areas of flood, or at times of flood, should I say. And it's a very rough grassland, which over time has been drained, and you can quite clearly see there's a very angular drain that goes up through the middle of this wet grassland. That's a structure that is maybe 3 to 4 feet wide and 4 to 5 feet deep. It's a man-made culvert, essentially, that has been dug through the peat soils downstream to take the water out of the peat and to try and dry that land to make it more profitable from a more productive type of farming system. So within the red, you can see the area within the red boundary. And so this area equates to about 25 hectares or 60 acres. And what we're going to do, hopefully, is create a re-wetting project. It's a fantastic project that's going to transform this area. So this is the opposite direction, looking to the sheep in the distance, the field just beyond the barn. There's a field with some sheep in. So that's where the project will start, and it will come all the way through where the barn is into the next rough field, and then again below and off screen to where we've previously seen. Again, you can see the area within the red boundary. So closely working with Hilary Maguire from the RSPB and Taria Wilson from Forest of Bowland AONB, we've come up with a plan to create this re-wetted landscape, essentially, which, as I've already said, is a considerable size, 25 hectares of 60 acres, encompassing different types of grassland, different types of soil, with the main aim really to create two types of habitat. One is an overwintering habitat of standing water for overwintering birds such as teal, widgeons, golden plover, that will come and feed on the standing water, as well as your usual wading birds and others. And so that area will be wetted up during the autumn and be allowed to stand in water through the winter months and into early spring, before later in spring the water table being able to drop, but remain damp with slight pools rather than constant flooding. And this will then benefit the wading birds such as the snipe, oystercatcher, curlew, lapwing and redshank. And we've been very lucky that this year has been the first year that we've seen all 5 wading species on the farm, and all of them have been breeding, nesting and rearing their young here. So the water table will be controlled with a sluice that we'll position on the boundary of our property. This is not to impact on the neighbour, and this will allow us to control the water table within our land. essentially re-wetting the peat soils and raising the level of the culvert to be able to spill out from the culvert and across the wetland. You can see here, this is late spring, sorry. This is when the water table is starting to drop from last winter. And this area is just a throng with birds in springtime and summertime. And as I said, all the wading species can be seen here. So during the breeding season, the water will then be allowed to drop, but not to a point where there are still puddles and still ponds that the waders will be able to feed through the summer months. So ideally, this will be a target, or an oasis for these target species to allow us to build up a reserve, essentially that can draw the birds into this particular area, knowing that there's always going to be water there. So we've done this with apologies. This is just showing this is some of the bird's nests that we found on the farm. So Curlew on the right hand side, that was quite a special one. We found a nest with 5 eggs in this time, and you can see the volunteers from RSPB here putting up camera traps to try and capture how that nest is predated or not, or how the birds interact. And we've had some fascinating footage from there. On the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the oyster catcher. This was on a gravel bed, and also we had redshank for the first time. So we're going to do this with the aid of consultants, and they're going to use QGIS and LiDAR, which are 2 mapping programs, to be able to plan where the flow of the water will be. And there are additional field drains that fall out of the productive fields into this wetland and then into the culvert. And we're going to reopen those field drains to allow the water to essentially spill over the surface before making its way into the main flow. So this will be done with the consultants, but also we've got to remember we've got to look after the vegetation and the management of the vegetation, and that will be done with our 4-legged friends, the native bred cattle. We have a number of different species. We have or breeds. We have the belted Galloways on farm. We also have some Highlanders, and their specific job is to manage the vegetation for these wading birds. The triangular field in the center of the picture here is a very different type of grassland to the remainder of this project site. This is a drier field to the upper level of it, whereas it floods in the bottom and it is a little boggy. This field is specifically going to be managed for lapwing, and this will be extremely closely cropped and grazed through the winter time, and so it's a very bare pasture in the spring. We'll then apply some farmyard manure, which the lapwings love to use as camouflage almost for when they're making their nests. And what we'll also do in addition to that is we're going to break this field down into 5 or 6 different plots and cultivate each plot each year, or a plot at a time essentially. And we'll leave some bare soil for the spring and into early summer, because lapwings love nesting on bare soil. And then in late summer, that will then be sown with an overwintering bird seed mix, and that crop will grow up. And so during the winter time, when possibly the lapwing's not there, then we'll be able to attract the birds that we've heard in the previous 2 speakers speeches earlier today, as to the wintering birds. Will get them in there and we'll have a feeding site essentially. One thing that we are probably going to do as well is we're going to put a predator fence the whole way around this site. That is to try and keep out things like badgers and foxes, because we know that they pose a significant threat to ground nesting birds. So the key to the success of this project is the management, and an element of the management is going to come from me as the farmer, and the support from RSPB and the ANOB and the consultants that we're using, but also these guys here in the picture, the 4-legged guys. The grazing that they do, the on-off type grazing, they'll be on for certain periods to create a mosaic structure of different sward heights, but then we'll take them away during the breeding season. So these are important, totally important to the success of this project. So we'd just like to thank you all for for letting us speak, and hopefully that we can create a fantastic habitat on the farm. And in a few years' time, this project will have worked, and we'll be able to see all the different species throughout the year.
Thank you so much, Pete. That's been absolutely brilliant. I'm just having a look at the questions here. So we've had a few questions. We are very, very tight for time, so we may overrun by a minute or so if everyone can bear with us. It'd be great if people can stay on. I think a really good one is about what farmers kind of need and what they can get. So we had a question from Lorette about what incentive there is for farmers. Can any of the speakers very quickly summarize that for us, just to explain what farmers can get? I know it's quite a big question. Pete, Sam, or Michelle, any of you want to answer that one?
Just very quickly, so we're in a mid-tier agri-environment scheme, so it's countryside stewardship scheme. We're in a mid-tier one, so that basically means there are certain parcels on the farm that we put into certain prescriptions to manage for different things, some of which are for birds. It's not as good as a higher level scheme, but we were deemed by Natural England as not being able to qualify for the higher level. But there are various other things there, and also, as I say, if you're lucky enough to be in an area, a protected landscape like an ANOB or a national park, you can also apply to the FIPL, the Farming and Protected Landscapes scheme, to do your own projects like we've done here.
Thank you, Pete. Couple of questions about curlews. So Leanne says, and this might be one for you, Michelle, rather than Sam. I often see curlew on my local walk at Dundrum Bay, which I think is Northern Ireland. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do we know of any conservation efforts in this area to help the curlew? Is that somewhere you've heard of, Dundrum Bay?
Yeah, that's in County Down. But yes, it's a protected. That Dundrum Bay is actually a SPA, SAC, and ASSI. So I'm less familiar with how it's being protected, but I know it's designated. And with that tidal influence, it's great for feeding and wintering curlew. Sam probably would know a bit more about the ins and outs of the sort of ecology that's already been spoken about. But yeah, it's a great area for them.
Thank you so much. And Sam, for you, Peter's noticed the number of chicks of curlews have successfully fledged has gone up, but the number of pairs that we've seen together have declined. What's causing this, and should we be concerned?
Quite a complicated question. So in terms of chicks, and if you're looking at some of the data coming in from our sort of Curlew Life project sites, that is probably likely to do with some of the really intensive intervention measures that we're putting in. So you saw a picture earlier, and I think Pete mentioned as well, these predator exclusion fences to just protect our nests and chicks during the most vulnerable time. So there's certainly a more intensive efforts to sort of reduce that risk of predation. So we're definitely seeing hatching rates significantly increase, and obviously the other management we're doing to reduce that predation pressure hopefully is it looks so far anyway that is working. And of course we're doing better habitat management alongside this, so better condition of habitat that they're using, hopefully better conditioned chicks and better protected chicks. In terms of the fewer pairs coming back, what we suspect might be happening is, although adult survival in curlews is generally quite high, which is why at the moment our conservation efforts are on the breeding ground, we do suspect we might have an aging population. So it might just be natural death. They are site faithful, so you might just not see pairs come back again. They're quite long-lived birds, so some of our birds could, well, I think the record for a curlew was actually 32 years old.
Wow.
For colouring curlew, but mostly you'd expect them to live sort of to 11 or 12. So I suspect that there might be just some natural sort of annual survival lost during winter. And as I say, some recreational disturbance can affect them, and also really severe cold weather snaps as well can affect their survival during winter too, which might prevent them coming back. But I wouldn't say from the project sites anyway that we would have had significant losses, what we would consider as significant losses. We're down a few pairs here and there, but I don't think anything to be concerned about at this point of time, but we'll obviously keep a watching brief.
Thank you all for joining in today, and we hope that you can join us for some more of our webinars. Thank you and goodbye.